Good morning. I have an interesting character this morning, a William Springfellow. Now, I don't know about you, but I had never heard of William Springfellow. But he has a fascinating, unique approach that's really helped our country, helped our religion, and helped some of the serious thinkers about exactly how we approach our applying of what God has taught to what we are doing. He has a line here, as I'm going to quote it. I believe biography and history is inherently theological in the sense that it contains already, literally by the virtue of the incarnation, the news of the gospel, whether or not anyone discerns that. We are each one of us parables. Imagine that. My life is a parable. I got to think about that. So there is a famous a Protestant theologian called Karl Barth, and he happens to encounter, I think it's on an airplane trip, he encounters this young lawyer, and the man started asking Karl Barth questions, and Karl Barth was so impressed with his spiritual insights and comments by just what he was asking that he said, and this is a quote from Karl Barth, "This is the man America should be listening to." The man in question was William Springfellow, a lawyer by training. Now, they say a lawyer by training, but as a young fellow, he's born in 1928, he's raised in the Episcopal Church, and his local priest encourages him to become a priest, because he says, hey, you're really a spiritual fellow. And William is just, and I think it's Frank William Springfellow, by the way, but anyway, he is just taken aback by this. He just cannot see how there should be two classes, that somehow you go from the normal class of people to this upper class of holier people. He just thought that made no sense to him at all. And unfortunately, a lot of our priests do suffer from a certain sense of superiority. It's just they've sacrificed tremendous amounts, and that's where they are. But William took a different route. So he goes to college. He becomes a part of a student group that's very active politically or socially, trying to help people out and such, and goes to become goes to a Christian conference. I think it's in, where is that? In London? I think it's in London. And after that, he goes to School of Economics in London. Then he studies theology with the Episcopal Church. And then finally, he goes into Harvard Law School, of all places. In 1956, he graduates with a law degree. Now, here he is, a young gay man, and he goes to the worst sections of Harlem and becomes what they call a corner lawyer. He just offers people services and help, and he gets a little business going of sorts. But as a part of being in the worst part of New York City, he sees the effects of poverty and the pain that is caused by the systems that kind of generate people in those kind of situations. So he just became this radical, deep feelings for them. He wrote books on poverty, war, racism, sexism. He got in trouble with the Episcopal Church because he was suggesting that women should be priests. Imagine that. And at that time, they were highly opposed to it. I think now there are women priests in the Episcopal Church. It'll take us Catholics a little bit longer. But on we go, and in the 60s, he ends up getting sick, and so he retires as a lawyer and goes off and starts doing a lot of the writing, in which he is really quite famous for, and has influenced quite a few. In the 60s, when there were major protests, whether it's against Vietnam or whatever, I think Dan Berrigan was one of them, that he basically got his ideas of how things should be from William Springfellow. Isn't that incredible? And Dorothy Day was a major admirer of him because he just had that view of how you shouldn't have systems that don't help people. You should have systems that do help people. And what he saw in terms of the law, in terms of government institutions, and in terms of ecclesial or church institutions, they just didn't seem to really be helping the poor. They didn't seem to be really caring. He has an interesting view he doesn't think that we should be looking at the Bible and trying to relate it to ourselves. He said, give me a second here. He says, His great theme was the fact that Constantine, this is way back in the 300s, kind of institutionalized the church, and therefore it tries to maintain the status quo, and that's not okay. But he says that we should understand America biblically. We should not understand the Bible Americanly, but rather we should understand the America and see how we can see the Bible in this. This goes back to us being parables. And then he describes holiness. And this is something I think we need to grab onto. He says, being holy does not mean being perfect, but being whole. I've heard this from others. It does not mean being exceptionally religious or being religious at all. It means being liberated from religiosity and religious pietism of any sort. It does not mean being morally better. It means being exemplary. It does not mean godly, but rather being truly human. So we just need to be human. And the more we are in touch with being human, the more we're in touch with the divine inside us. And he very much is a spiritual man. You can't take this definition. But the idea of perfection leaves people with really strict, hard lines. And he didn't see that at all. He thought that compassion was the first thing you have to look at. And so he gives us a view of Christianity which altered a lot of the major players that we've heard about in our day that have brought about great social change, really good things. That's not to say that you and I don't have some responsibility. We do. We have to realize we're a parable, and we get to go into our day and say, hey, am I working to be right? Am I working to be perfect? Or am I working to be compassionate? Am I working as a person to be whole? Oh, that's a challenge for the day. Good luck. And thank you for listening.